In this modern age, we increasingly find ourselves occupied with our fast-paced, moving lives. Every day, our struggles somewhat overshadow the real values of our lives, our families, our friends, and more importantly, our search for spiritual happiness. In this documentary, we will explore the Qasim family and analyse how lessons from Lady Fatima can be adapted within the strains of modern society. Abbas is 15 years old, and like most boys his age, he is finding it hard to connect with his parents. He finds that culturally they are miles apart. Abbas is a typical teenager who loves consoles, playing football and going out with his mates. Salam Abbas, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good.
Abbas, you're 15. Apart from going to school, what do you do in your time?
I don't know. I play some football or go to the gym, play PlayStation. Depends on the day.
What about later in the evenings? Are you allowed to go out?
If I'm going out with my family, then yeah, I'm allowed to go out with my cousins. If I'm going out with my mates, no, not really. It's because my mates are allowed out, but I just have to stay at home. My dad doesn't trust me no more.
Do you feel like your parents are in touch with you?
Not really, because my dad still thinks we're living in India. She's like, boys my age, they open their shop at 5 in the morning. They like work all day with their fathers and put their little brothers to bed. He needs to understand we don't live in those times no more.
Around you, what problems do you see 15-year-olds face?
Well, in my school, people are doing all sorts of stuff. They're drinking, they're smoking, they're doing drugs, they're swearing, they're going out with girls. Everyone's just messed up at the moment. And the real problem is that Muslims are trying to copy them. They're trying to be cool, when really they're not. They're just trying to act cool, but they just can't do it. And it doesn't suit them, and some people are just gone astray.
Can you tell me more?
Like, say for example, there's one guy I knew. He was a good mate of mine, and he used to pray on time and everything. But now, since he's been hanging out with these people, he's just become such a bad guy. He's like swearing, he's doing all sorts of stuff.
Do you think parents could do more to bring their children back on the right path?
Yeah, definitely. Because like, the two type of parents, some just leave them some put their sons in a prison. They like can't go out, can't do anything. But other parents, like, they sacrifice time for their children. They take them to football matches and stuff like that. And they allow them to go out with their mates. And because they sacrifice time for their sons, and they spend time with their sons, it makes a whole lot of a difference. Because that way the sons respect them back.
Because many times the problems that can be seen in the relationship between the elder generation and the youths is the problem that we do not follow what our Holy Prophet has taught us about when we bring up our sons, for example. You see, the Holy Prophet says in the first 7 years, for example, care for them. Then the next 7, discipline them. Then the next 7, be a friend to them. You find with us today, in the first 7 we care, the second 7 we care, and the third 7 we discipline. By that time, the third 7, it's too late to discipline them. They've already set their opinions.
That when you see a bad kid, or a kid who's gone off the path, or a kid who's abandoned Islam, go check out the parents. And you will 9 times out of 10 see parents who have either not practiced Islam, or they might be great Muslims, always at the mosque, but they never passed it on to their children.
Pennsylvania State University had a study on the fathers and their relationship with the sons. And they said there are 4 types of fathers. A father who's disengaged, a disciplinarian, a caregiver, and a playmate. What we need more are people who are friends to their sons and daughters, listening to their interests and even willing to join them in those interests. Those few hours that a parent spends with the child can make a difference to the whole week, to the month, and indeed to the year.
The parents and children together have to come together to avoid this. Number 1 is communication. It's a cliche, but it's a true cliche. It's the truest of cliches. That if you don't communicate with your child, and I speak as a parent and as a child, if you don't communicate with your child, then you cannot understand him or her, and vice versa.
And that's why you find Imam Ali in another narration says, you bring up your children in a different way from the way you were brought up. If my father, for example, enjoyed playing cricket when he was younger, and I enjoy playing football, then my father, if he sticks to his guns, he'll say, I will only enjoy cricket for the rest of my life. Whereas if I enjoy football, if the father makes an effort to come and enjoy that which I enjoy, it will make a big difference.
I think to understand that Sayyidah Fatima Zahra lived at a time, in various times. There were times when she was highly respected because she was the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then came a very sad period of her life when it wasn't quite the same, because the Khilafat was being disputed so widely, and she maintained who she was despite the conditions she was in. So whether they were conditions when life was good and when people respected her for who she was, or when it was when they didn't understand her status, she still maintained who she was. So I think what you learn from her is that peer pressure is temporal, but who you are remains steady.
The parents have to recognize that they have to act as exemplars to the youth, number one. Number two, one of the rights of the youth, according to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, is that you engage in dialogue with your child, with your son and with your daughter.
Talk to your child, talk to your parent, share your problems. Because once you communicate with each other, you can understand each other. And once you understand each other, you can be close to each other.
I think families are probably what creates communities, and communities create the world. We only have to look around us to see what happens when the institution of a family breaks down. In the world we live in now, with people coming home at different times, TV dinners, I think we need to go back to the basics that Sayyidah taught us. When we look at her life, let me take small examples of her life. We find, you know, when Masaib is read about her death, this is something that strikes me a lot. We find that she sends her sons to the mosque of the Prophet, and she tells Asma that when they come back, feed the children before you bring them to me. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam refuses to eat because he says, I have never eaten without my mom. Now, it may be a contention of Masaib when we're really sad, but it also teaches us that she ate as a family. So we've got a lot of things here to understand from her life to bring this unity together.
Unfortunately, Muslim parents seem to think that there is some virtue to be had out of keeping some distance or aloofness from their children, out of having some kind of disciplinarian mindset in which the children are seen but not heard. And this is culture, it's not Islam.
The first thing is to take advice from the Quran. When in Surah Bani Israel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. He says, your first directive is to be able to do the ibadah of your Rabb, but وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, to understand what parents mean, the respect that is involved. And when he says وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, do not even say uff to them. It means you may think differently for them, but do not verbalize.
Rasulullah is given one child, his sons die in infancy. One child, a daughter, in that era of son is everything, man is everything, daughters are buried alive. He has this one child, Bibi Fatima, and she is so wonderful, so consummate, so perfect, that the greatest man of all time says that she is not simply Fatima, she is Abiha. She is the mother of her father. And again, we say this glibly. We tell our friends, did you know what Bibi Fatima was called? She was called mother of her father. Yes. But have we stopped to think what a title that was?
What is the position of a mother? A mother is a lady who gives you warmth in your life, and also is a lady who supports you in your life. Fatima al-Zahra was exactly that for Rasulullah. Warmth. Rasulullah is praying, and they would throw the placenta of animals on the head of Rasulullah while he's in his prostration.
It is Bibi Fatima who, when he comes home in the evening upset, dirty, who sits him down and calms him down and comforts him and hugs him and cleans off all that rubbish. When he goes to a nearby town to spread the word of Allah and they throw stones at him and he comes back bleeding, saying, never have I had a sadder day than this, it is Bibi Fatima who sits with her father. It is Bibi Fatima who wipes away the blood, who tends to his wounds. On the day of Uhud, when the Muslims turn around and run away, thinking Rasulullah is dead, it's Bibi Fatima who comes from Medina to be at her father's side, to staunch the bleeding, to put ashes on that wound of Rasulullah's head where the blood was gushing out from, on the battlefield. This is Fatimatul Zahra.
Respect is of the utmost importance within the religion of Islam, as in there are so many verses which discuss the respect that one should show towards one's parents.
You don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but you can respect them. You can understand that they are thinking differently. I don't think you can ever get rid of the culture gap. It's always going to remain there. What we need to do is understand each other's positions, and far more, if I can say, talks, far more seminars, far more directives from the Mimbar, as to be able to understand each other.
Don't tell me that fathers aren't supposed to respect their children when Rasulullah and Bibi Fatima's relationship was one of such mutual respect. Because you have to. And that is the key to building any family. Islam commands respect for everyone. And yet what we often do is we'll respect our teacher or our employer, our boss. We'll respect elder members of our distant community or family. But the people we share our house with, the people whom we live under the same roof with, the people whom we sit at a dining table and eat dinner with, those are the people we think respect is exempt from. And we run our tongues and our mouths attacking those people. We've all done it. And then we have to stop and think, no, they're worthy of my respect as much as everyone else, if not more so.
And the narrations are aplenty which discuss this area. Heaven lies underneath the feet of the mother, as an example. Another narration which tells us of a youth who was not able to say La ilaha illallah in his final stages because of the disobedience he had shown his mother. For years they had not spoken to each other. He was not even able to say these few words until his mother had forgiven him.
When we talk of respecting one another, when we talk of respecting our families, again we look at the life examples of our Masumeen. You look at those hadiths. Sometimes I read a hadith or I read a narration from one of our Imams talking about their father, or Imam Hussein talking about Imam Hassan, or Bibi Fatima in conversation with Rasulullah. You read those traditions and you see the way in which they address one another. We take the content of the hadith. We think whatever the story is about, the moral of that story, and we go away and we tell our friends, Rasulullah said to Bibi Fatima, do this, yeah. And that's great, the content's important. And we often forget the style in which they spoke to each other, the respect which they had for one another. Not just love and affection, which they had in abundance. The most loving and affectionate of families, of course they were, but the respect and the awe which Fatima had for Rasulullah, which Hussein had for Hassan, which Imam Ja'far Sadiq had for Imam Muhammad Baqir. And you see the way in which they spoke about one another from each generation to each generation, from elder to younger. And you see that is respect. When Masumeen address each other in that manner, that is our real example of respect and communication and dialogue and interaction.
17-year-old Sahela is currently doing her A-levels. Like most girls her age, she loves to spend her time socializing with her friends, whether it be watching movies together, going shopping, or keeping in touch via social networks. We talked to her about the challenges she faces as a young Muslim woman wearing the hijab.
It's not hijab which is difficult. I mean, I really like representing what I believe in. One time in mosque, I heard in a lecture that a woman's right in Islam is that she's the flag bearer of the religion. And when I heard this, I felt really special and it really touched me. But it's those long, random questions that people ask that really annoy me.
What sort of questions have you been asked?
Well, I've been asked things like, do you sleep with that on, or do you shower with that on? And it's like, how ignorant can you be? And sometimes I'm even feeling paranoid as to what people are thinking about me. And it's like, no, I'm not depressed, yes, I do speak English, and no, I'm not going to bomb you.
How do you respond to such people?
Well, I try telling them that in Islam, we judge people by their character. And hijab actually does not oppress us. We don't judge people by how good looking they are, because good looks come from the genes that we inherit, and this we can't take credit for. But what we can take credit for is good morals and a great personality.
What do you mean by judging a woman purely on what she looks like?
You know, like today in the media, women are being used to like advertise just about anything, be it cars, shampoos, magazines, anything. And I find this degrading and absolutely disgusting, because you're just choosing these women to advertise such products just because of their outward beauty. No thought has been given to the qualities that count, like their inward beauty, their inner intelligence, their true nature. And it's like they're the ones being suppressed because they can't really show their like true nature.
What do you mean by that?
I read somewhere that oppression means giving something or someone a status that they do not necessarily deserve. So surely these women who are being used to advertise products, being given a status that they don't necessarily deserve. I tell them that in Islam we believe in judging someone by their character and not on how good looking they are.
Generally, what other pressures do you think you face being Muslim and growing up in the West?
Well, it's a standard thing at my age, like being invited to parties where there's alcohol, problem with drugs, boys, and all the rest of it. And it's like now it's getting increasingly difficult to maintain my social hijab. Like when we were younger, me and my friends on Friday nights used to go to each other's houses. But now all they want to do on Friday nights is just go out and drink. And I have to keep explaining to them why I can't come with them. And the issue of boys is like the be-all and end-all of life. And it's like they don't find anything else to talk about than that. You know, sometimes you're put into really sticky situations where you think climbing Mount Everest even is easier than standing up for what you believe in.
Why do you feel like you can't stand up for what you believe in?
It's mainly because everybody else is different to you and they're looking at things from a different perspective. And I guess it's really hard when you're in the minority and you're against the majority. You just don't want to, you're really not willing to express your views because you're worried about what they'll think about you and what they'll say about you to others. So I guess I have to start thinking about where I stand on some of these issues before I go to uni next year.
Nothing wrong with fitting in. Islam doesn't tell us we have to stand out like a sore thumb. Islam doesn't tell us we have to always be on our own in the playground or in the office, eating on our own, having no friends with non-Muslims. Not at all. Islam says fit in, integrate, be part of society.
Those who come forward and say we find it a struggle being religious, for example, or we find that we have to compromise our beliefs. On the contrary, the religion of Islam does not suppress a person's lifestyle. It just simply gives you boundaries. As in, there are many actions which non-Muslims perform, which we can perform as well.
Fake friends, the people in your group or your school or your college or your workplace who ask you to do things in order to fit in, they're the people who will never be satisfied.
But part of the makeup of the great personalities in history is the fact that, number one, they will always be willing to answer your questions. Number two, they'll answer your questions with humility. And number three, they'll answer your questions in a logical manner.
And true friends are the ones who'll stick with you no matter what your principles are, no matter what you believe, no matter what you do. True friends will be there for you no matter what you aspire to become, no matter what article of clothing you wear on your head, no matter what belief you profess.
Many times today, our females say we don't have any role models. Well, here in Fatima, you see somebody who faced just as much hardship as her namesake is facing today, yet look at her answers and look at her willingness to defend the religion.
Bibi Fatima, from birth till death, is in a minority. She's never with the in crowd. She's always facing peer pressure on a level that you and I will never have to worry about. Literally physical intimidation. And yet from birth till death, she stands up for herself. She defends herself. She defends her father. She defends her husband, her children. From birth till death, and her legacy after death is that her daughters stand in that courtyard in Damascus and they stand up for themselves. They stand up for their brother and their father and for their religion.
How hard was it for these two daughters, who were the granddaughters of the Holy Prophet, yet who had to stand in front of men they've never met while they were being abused emotionally by those people?
So I say to all Muslims today, especially my sisters, especially the women, if you're worried about bullying, you're worried about being in a minority, you're worried about not fitting in, then just look at Bibi Fatima and be reassured. That's not what's important. What's important is to know that you're on the right path, that you're with the truth, and that when push comes to shove, you are able to defend yourself.
Fatima was not just standing up against injustice, she recognized the validity of her statements through the works of her father and indeed the message of God. She came forward with chapter 4 verse 11, chapter 2 verse 180, chapter 19 verse number 7, chapter 27 verse number 16, All of these chapters and verses she came forward with as evidence of God highlighting that there is inheritance, and that prophets before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family had left behind inheritance for those of the next of kin.
Because eventually, if you're right, if you're with the truth, people will come to you. And the hijab is that compulsory principle of Islam, that flag of Islam, that if our sisters relinquish, and if our brothers ignore, then we'll have given up a part of who we are.
Hijab is a question where one has to balance the physical as well as the social attitudes. Why? Because we find, for example, if somebody is looking very modest, but they're very rude when they speak to you, they're very arrogant when they speak to you, then that clothing which they are wearing defies the point, because you want a balance in the two. At the same time, when you are someone who is modest and has excellent manners, you should be somebody who at the same time balances their look in public. Meaning what? Meaning that the religion of Islam sought that the female, knowing that she is an attractive creation, the religion of Islam wanted an emphasis not only on the attractiveness of the female, but also on the character of the female as well.
When you have an icon, when you have an example you can look up to, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. In the Messenger of Allah, you have the most excellent example. Then you have her as the most excellent example of hijab. Then to draw from that example and aspire to be like her, because her hijab did not stop her from being the daughter that her father aspired for, the wife that her husband aspired for, the mom that her children aspired for, and more important so, the community member that she was.
But this did not stop her coming out and standing up for the rights of the human being and the rights of the Muslim. It goes to show you, when you wear a hijab, it doesn't stop you going out to work. It doesn't stop you going out to campaign. It doesn't stop you, for example, going out and enjoying the world. You find with Fatima al-Zahra, there are many examples where she would come forward, she'd help the poor, she'd help the orphans. Her hijab didn't stop her from helping these categories of people.
She teaches me that her hijab was an identity. That's the first thing you learn. Secondly, you learn from this hijab that it gives you the ability to be known for who you are rather than what you look like. And whenever you look at the personality of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, it didn't matter what she looked like. I'm sure she was awesome. I'm sure she was the most beautiful woman around. But that didn't matter. What mattered was what she did.
For example, the wearing of the hijab. It is important to understand that there are others in the world who are living a similar struggle. And there are those before you who have gone through a similar struggle. For example, if we were to look at this issue historically and on a contemporary level. Historically, you find Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. Her hijab wasn't just simply a hijab physical. It wasn't just the idea of covering, for example, one's chest and one's lower part of the body.
The blind man enters the room and she begins to walk away. Rasulullah says, Fatima, why are you leaving? The man is blind. She says, he may be blind, but I'm not blind.
It goes to show you she makes no mention of the physical aspect. Rather, she makes a mention of our social attitude. That somebody who we are not necessarily related to in a way where they can see us is not somebody who we, for example, should have that such of a close relationship with.
Mrs. Qasim has an equally hectic lifestyle to her husband. As a busy mom of two and a teacher at her local madrasa, she has the challenge of trying to juggle looking after her house, her family, and planning her madrasa lessons. Being a teacher in madrasa, you must meet many young people. They look up to you as a mentor. Do you find this a big responsibility, and how do you cope with it?
Initially, when I first joined madrasa, it was just, okay, wow, I'm a teacher. And then you realize that no, it's a huge responsibility. You know, the kids, they're observing what you do, and they look up to you. And then you think, no, these kids are our future, and you have to, whatever they learn from a very young age, no matter what it is, like be it, you know, the name of Allah or the manners of going to mosque or anything, and then you think, no, you have, this is a responsibility, and you have to give it your best, and inshallah Allah will help you as well. It's a really rewarding job.
Do you feel worried that your children are growing up in this society which could potentially lead them into sin?
I think as a parent you have to be vigilant all the time. You have to know what the kids are up to. Yes, give them everything, you know, give them the laptop and give them or the computer or whatever. Maybe even give them the phone even if they want. But always be vigilant, be a step ahead of them. As a mother, you know you want to give your kids everything. You want to give them the laptop, you want to give them the freedom of their phone and everything. So if you keep saying no to everything, obviously they're going to rebel. And be a friend, I think, and talk to them, and you set boundaries, and I think talk together with them. Okay, this is what I expect out of you, and hopefully if you talk together and work out a plan or something, then I think I don't see why it shouldn't work.
What advice would you give to mothers of young children on how to bring up children in today's society, considering it's quite a daunting task for any young woman?
From the day I was expecting, I knew that I had to, every action that I took was going to affect the baby. I mean, even the world has proved that as well now. So every action that I did, anything it all had to be good deeds, everything, like reading the Quran all the time. And also, when they were young kids, you know, read the Quran in front of them, pray in front of them, take them to mosque. I think that's very important as well. Take them to mosque, take them places where religion is emphasized as well. Take them to places where they see their community, people with scarves and everything. So that as well, and also join them with, have daily conversations with them. Enjoy life with them, I would say.
What does hijab mean to you?
Hijab, when I first wore it, it was just putting a scarf on, and that's it. No, not such value to it as well. But now when I see it, it's an identity. You know, it's like a doctor wearing his jacket. You know, he's got a responsibility. And as a Muslim, I think that yes, I am a Muslim, and I can show the public that I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm not ignorant. I like to help others.
Being a Muslim woman who adheres to the hijab, do you ever feel like you have a particular responsibility to portray Islam to the West?
Straight after 9/11, there was an old lady who came to me and she said, "All Muslim, you should die because you are there to kill other people." And on that day, I made a promise to Allah that I will make sure and change even one person's attitude towards a Muslim. It just so happened once in my local supermarket, I happened to meet the same old lady, and I helped her. And I can tell she was so shocked. She was really shocked that, oh yes, a woman with hijab helping. And from that day onwards, she completely changed. And there was also another incident, which was, I will never forget that as well. A man I just gave him way, and he came out of the car, and he actually burnt onto me and said, "Thank you, you are a woman with hijab, and you've given me way."
Would you say the society that you grew up in is the same society that your children are growing up in now?
Oh, it's very different. From where I come, Kenya, it was completely different. There was a lot of morality, a lot of respect for the elders. The language was completely different. Here, when I came to London, it was the billboards, the magazines here that you see, the TV programs. There's a lot of nudity, I would say.
What shocked you the most?
The relationships before marriage, I would say. I mean, I remember when I first came to London and I joined college, and I remember there was a girl, because I married myself at the age of 17, and there was a girl at 15, and I asked her, "Oh, so when did you get married if you're expecting at 15? And she said, "I don't even know who the father is." That was a real shock to me.
In today's society, it is very easy and very natural for a woman to feel overwhelmed by her responsibilities. Do you ever feel like this, and how do you overcome your feeling?
As a woman, obviously, you have lots of responsibilities. You are a mother, you work outside home, and when you come back from school, you have routines, like for taking kids to football matches and tuitions here and there, extracurricular activities. But yes, on the other hand, you think that Allah has chosen you to do these responsibilities. You take it one day at a time.
Every era, every generation of human beings thinks our generation is the hardest. We look around at our lives and we say, we struggle so much. Yes, we've got new technology. Yes, we've got greater wealth. Yes, we live longer. But we have a whole new set of problems that our peers didn't have, our parents didn't have, our grandparents didn't have. We have stress that no one else can relate to. And when you study history, you see that the people who went before us went through everything we went through, if not more. And when we look at our own Islamic history, we look at the example of Lady Fatima, for example.
Was brought up in a period of struggle. Many times when we go through hardship, we look for somebody as a buffer for our emotion, somebody who we could relate to.
We see a woman who balanced and juggled all of those domestic priorities that we as parents, as homemakers, as fathers, mothers today think are unique to us. That we're the ones who have to balance the kids' school and their education and their homework and our own jobs and our marital lives and the food and the shopping, etc., etc. In the era of the 24-hour Tesco's, we think life is so hard.
Fatima Zahra alayhi salam is a role model for her, in the sense that in the same way she finds she's going through a struggle, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam before her had also gone through a struggle.
Imam Ali says, I used to come home and see my wife Fatima. Her hand was covered in calluses. She had ground the mill of grain for so long. Her chest was marked by the ropes in which she pulled up water from the well. Her clothes were covered in dust. She had spent the entire day sweeping all of our home and the street and the surrounding environs.
Raising a family doesn't occur outside. Raising a family occurs inside the home. And children will always look at the example their parents have set them rather than what's going around them. It's a cop-out when we say my children are not raised properly because the society outside is un-Islamic. At the end of the day, it's what you do inside. It's all too easy to dictate and to say this is what should be done. The crux of the matter is what is done.
So when we today, we sit down and we prioritize our lives, put the money to one side, put the job to one side, put the car to one side, put the socializing to one side. If we look at Bibi Fatima, we know our priority number one is Allah, Islam, prayer. Our priority number two is our family. She is that axis around which Ahlul Bayt revolves, around which the household of the Prophet revolves, bringing together Muhammad, Ali, Hassan, Hussein, Zainab and Kulsum.
Mr. Qasim leads a typical city lifestyle. Up at 6 a.m, he has his breakfast on the go and drives to central London, where he works as an investment banker. By the time he gets home at 7 p.m, he's left shattered from his busy day. We met Shabir at his office to discuss his frantic lifestyle. We discuss with him the difficulties he faces trying to balance his working day while maintaining his spirituality. What is your daily routine in the morning?
Well, I wake up at 6 in the morning every day. I have a shower, shave, and have a quick breakfast. And by 7:15 I have to leave home. Usually, as I get to work, I have my emails to open and answer telephone calls, because being an investment company, we have clients abroad.
At work, do you have time to phone your wife, maybe text your kids?
To phone my wife? No way. It does get very difficult. She does try to call me now and again, but I cannot reply her back. It gets very difficult.
Do you get to spend quality time with your children? Do you take them to a football match, maybe even watch them play football?
Do you know the quality time that I spend with Abbas is when I take him to school and to football matches. And we usually talk about sports, if he has won any tournaments or played the game. Sometimes I just run out of conversation with him because it's a big gap barrier we have with each other. And I don't know, we just need to, I sometimes have to bring myself down to his level to talk about. At the moment he's doing his GCSE and he's always constantly revising for his studies. And by the time I get home, I don't have much time for him. So yeah, I do worry a lot about the kids.
Do you feel guilty that you don't get to spend enough time with your son?
Yeah, I do, of course I do. And in today's climate, what can one do? I just can't help it because there's so much pressure attached around the world, and we are all living in this new age, new era, that it gets difficult for us to look after our kids in that sense.
Would you say the relationship that you have with your son Abbas reflects the relationship that you had with your father?
No, not at all. During our times when we were growing up, the relationship with our parents was different. We could not answer back to them. And the responsibilities also we had was much greater than what Abbas is now. I remember when I was 15, I was more or less the household earner at the time with my father. And we remember doing things together because we had so much time. But today, you can't do these things with the kids.
What about when you pray? Would you say your work environment encourages you to pray? Do you get to pray on time? Do you get a special room to pray in? Do you pray with your fellow Muslim colleagues?
I do pray on time, which is in a little corner in my office on that side. And as far as the colleagues are concerned, they never get a chance to pray because I'm lucky in one way that at least I do have my own office. I do try and pray on time daily, but it does get difficult. And even if I pray, it does The focus is not there because I'm always thinking about my meetings, phone calls.
What about when you get home after work? Do you have time to read the Quran or any extra daily supplications?
No, never do. It's very tough. I get home around 8 in the evening, and by the time I get home, I'm pretty tired. Even the supplications which I do, they don't really come out from the heart.
How do you ensure that spirituality is maintained within your household?
I do take them to Saudi for ziyarat, for Umrah, or sometimes to Iran, Iraq, or be it in Syria. That, I think, maintains the spirituality. I've been Hajj a couple of times, and I'm looking forward to going next time. You know, when you're listening in the month of Muharram, when you listen to majalises, and you often wonder what these places are. And Karbala is a spirituality. It is a place where once you've been there, you just want to stay there. You forget being in UK or the West.
Do you feel like these places change the way you are when you come back?
Definitely it does. For a few weeks, you just don't know where you are. You just want to go back, and you don't want to work in UK at all. But then again, you have to start your work again.
Shabir knows himself, which is an excellent trait to have, because he recognizes the fact that he wants to increase in spirituality, and therefore his conscience is alive. And when the human being's conscience is alive, it shows that they have a direction and they have a vision which they seek to achieve.
Spirituality is an essential aspect of Islam. We all say that we all want to be spiritual, we want to connect with our soul and our nafs and our ruh, but it's easier said than done. It's perhaps the most difficult part of being a Muslim.
Within his statements that he seeks to concentrate in his prayers. And you find that it's something quite normal for people to always evaluate the way they worship God and to contemplate about their worship. And this is where he can gain from the examples of the Prophet and his family.
Bibi Fatima is someone whose prayer is unrivaled. And when I say unrivaled, I literally mean there is no human being, no woman especially, if we're going to compare her to all of women in history, whose prayer compares to Bibi Fatima's prayer.
She is an exemplar for us about the importance of Salat al-Layl, that period of the night when you are alone with your Lord, when you are able not only to ask from your Lord, but also you feel the mercy of your Lord set in. But the beauty of Salat al-Layl was that when she would finish it, you'd see her contemplate about the rest of humanity than about her own self.
In fact, Allama Majlisi writes in his book in Biharul Anwar, he narrates from Imam Hussain, who says that I saw my brother Imam Hassan. He said to me that our mother used to sit all night in prayer. All night she used to go into sajda and ruku until dawn, praying for each and every Muslim in our community by name.
He said to her, mother, you ask about the believers and you don't ask about yourself and those people around you. And she said the neighbors and then the family. Meaning what? Meaning that my prayer has taught me how to be, number one, a sincere human being, but number two, how to feel like somebody who is part of a whole religion.
The Sufi scholar Hassan al-Basri, he says, never has the Muslim community seen a woman as submissive to Allah as Fatima al-Zahra. Her feet became swollen. She prayed so much. So this is her prayer, and it's a prayer that we have to remember.
Fatima al-Zahra shows us that worship is not about oscillating tongue movements. Worship is not just a ritual. Rather, worship exalts you to a higher level. From your animalistic desires, you gain closeness to God.
That when she cooked, she had a tasbih in her hand, or when she ground the wheat, and in one hand there was the wheat being grinded, and in one hand the tasbih. A lot to learn from it. She imbibed that spirituality into the food which her children ate. We could do that. If you cannot hold a tasbih in your hand for whatever reason, maybe you could have an MP3 player, an iPod, or whatever media you have, to be on with some sort of recitation or zikr that will be imbibed in the food.
On his journey towards work, if he purchases, for example, an iPod or an MP3, he'll be able to listen, for example, to lectures which speak about his religion, the history of his religion. He'll be able to listen to supplications on his way to work. He'll be able to listen, for example, to pieces of advice or famous sayings.
Imam Ali alayhi salam, for example, says that 1 hour spent in reflection, in thought, is worth 70 years of ibadah, of worship. And Bibi Fatima is someone who sits aside with her tasbih. The tasbih that we have comes from Janaba Sayyidah. That her father gives her this instead of a servant. People say to her, go to your father and ask for a servant. He doesn't give her a servant, he gives her a tasbih.
Closeness to Allah doesn't mean just sitting on a musalla and praying 24/7. I think it means living. And it means living the roles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you in whatever form. Let's look at her as a daughter. She was the ultimate daughter. She protected her father, and even as a child, when I read the fact that this 5-year-old, 6-year-old child walks with her father and people are throwing things at him, it's those little hands that wipe away all the hurt, those little hands that heal him.
And it's not something we need in our hand. We're people of an age where we memorize everything. We have countless du'as and surahs and supplications in our minds.
Comes back from work very late, but so do many others in his community. So why do they not organize for one night in the week when they all know they'll come together at a particular time, sit together and discuss a religious issue, and sometimes invite people from the community who are renowned religious figures to help them in this discussion. They can invite a number of individuals.
To be able to have those gatherings where we are able to understand and take back something practical, definitely are an absolute must in our lives.
We can learn a number of important issues from the prayer of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. The first issue is the fact that there are 2 prayers which are called her prayers, which are highly recommended for us to recite.
If you don't make prayer the cornerstone of your everyday life, above your family, above your household, above your job, then you have to worry about your aqidah.
The Qasims are a typical Muslim family that have come under the strains and pressures of living in the West. It is not just the West that is challenging, it is the pace at which we choose to live our lives, our pursuits, our ambitions, that govern what we can make time for and what we cannot. In Lady Fatima, they have found a great role model, a lady that had a very balanced and fulfilling life, one that revolved around a deep love for her Creator and the religious teachings that her father brought to us. Each member of this family can walk away inspired by an aspect of her character. She was loved and respected as a daughter, a mother, a wife, a teacher, a friend, an employer. In whatever capacity she interacted with anyone, she has a status that is unsurpassed by any other woman in Islamic history. The Holy Prophet has said that Fatima is the greatest lady of all time.